Erev Tov, welcome, good evening. I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening as we gather together as a community in solidarity and support in Medinat Israel at this most challenging time. We gather to daven, to pray, to listen, and to learn. And just to be able to support each other and our brothers and sisters in the Medina. We'd like to begin this evening. It is my great pleasure to introduce and to also to say out loud Baruch Rofei Cholim to Rabbi Shmuel Greenberg, the Rav of the Young Israel of White Plains, who's joining us this evening. Rabbi Greenberg, we are so happy to see you. And so glad that you could join us, but also so glad to see you strong and healthy and joining our community this evening. Rabbi Greenberg.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. I have to say that I am here talking to you and to everybody else because of all the tefillot and the tehillim and the mitzvot people did on my behalf. I have to tell you that there was a while where I was more on a different world than this world. But the tefillot brought me back, and I'm very appreciative. And it is that koach tefillah that Rabbi is referring to that we're going to use. That's the muscles of Klal Yisrael, that we're going to daven for the soldiers, for the people of Eretz Yisrael, and guess what? For ourselves and Jews world over. And in particularly, I'm very privileged to be able to introduce Joseph Block, who's a graduate of SAR, and I remember he was one of the valedictorians at the graduation, and he personified really the best. He's like a family member of mine, and he personifies the very best. He went right after high school. He went to Yeshivat HaKotel, where he learned and with Hasmada. He davened. It was beautiful to watch. And then after he finished his year, he said, I want to now take that Torah and protect Klal Yisrael, and he enlisted in the army. And he's one of the Chayalim, one of the many who are there protecting Eretz Israel, protecting Jews world over. We know that it's no secret that the Chayalei Tzva Hagana are protecting Jews world over. I just want to say that he should have the bracha, being that he is. There's something wrong? You could hear me? You can't hear me or see me?
We can hear you. We're good. We can hear you. Absolutely, we can hear you. You're good.
Could you hear me now? Got it. Okay, great. I just want to say that Joseph Yashikoach, and it's a pleasure that you represent our best. And you are taking the Shalom Rav La'oavei Torasecha, that there's peace that comes about to those who love Torah, and you should be one of the many soldiers who bring about that Adonai Eiz La'amod Yitein, Adonai Yivarechet Amo B'Shalom, that Hashem should give strength to his people, and Hashem should give the ultimate blessing of peace to the Jews in Israel, to protect the soldiers and protect all of us. So really, it's a privilege. Thank you again, Rabbi, for having me come on and say the few words and see the Olam tonight. Thank you very much.
I'm sure I'm speaking to many familiar faces here tonight, but for those who don't know me, my name is Joe Block. I'm originally from White Plains, New York. I graduated SAR Academy in 2014 and SAR High School in 2018. Let's go Sting. After that, I went to Yeshivat HaKotel in Yerushalayim, where I learned there for 2 years, until I drafted into the IDF in March 2020, drafted into the Givati Infantry Brigade, where I currently serve along the Lebanon border in Gidud Sabar. Growing up in New York, we always made sure to attentively follow all the news and happenings that were going on in Israel, and all the more so when the times are going tough as they are now. So I'm sure you're all very much updated on the current situation in Israel. So what I'll give you tonight is a little insight into what the mindset is in the IDF. Right now, the whole army is on a very high alert. As you know, the last couple weeks have been very tough. Taking rockets, us having to respond, and very much so, they're ready for anything. At this point, it doesn't look like there's going to be a ground invasion of the Gaza Strip, but as is fundamental to the ethos of Tzahal, we are always ready for anything. We have our bags packed, everything's ready to go. If in a moment's notice we need to go down there to protect the citizens of Israel. In the meantime, the Air Force is continuing to strike enemy targets within the Strip, and the Iron Dome continues to protect our citizens within our country. The rest of us in the Army are protecting the periphery, the borders, and unfortunately, also having to protect internally within our country. And that's the sad reality right now that we're facing, is that when and if there is a ceasefire in the near future, there will very much unfortunately be long-lasting wounds that will take away from this conflict. Wounds that are going to need attending to desperately. So the message I wish to impart tonight is that when this conflict does end, we should all work very much towards amending what has been broken, mending the divides and gaps which to rip us apart, both within Am Yisrael and within all the people in this land. So B'ezrat Hashem, we will finish this conflict a bit safer and maybe a little bit further along the path towards peace and stability here in Eretz Yisrael.
Thank you, Joe. I hope you're sleeping, but thank you for sharing that with us and giving us a taste from our own family of what we're all and everyone there is experiencing. I think the fact that so many co-sponsors came together literally today in the last 12 hours or so to be part of this event, of this Erev Tefillah, solidarity, of learning, is a tribute to how much Medinat Yisrael means to all of us. I want to thank the Bayit, YAOZ, Riverdale Jewish Center, CSAR, the Riverdale Minyan, the Kehillah, Kinneret Day School, the Riverdale Y, Yeshivat Maharat, Yeshivat Chovevei Torah, Young Israel of New Rochelle, Young Israel of Scarsdale, everybody for recognizing. I know it's late, there's a lot going on tonight. That's also when we should mention this. It's the yard site, the first yard site of Rabbi Dr. Norman Lem, Zichrono Livracha, and I know that some people are coming or will be coming soon, from certainly an appropriate tribute to somebody who brought the meaning of Medinat Yisrael to so many of us, including myself and so many of my colleagues. Yehi Zichro Baruch. We came together because it matters, and we're about to read the parsha next week, which says, "V'chitavo milchama ba'artzachem al hatzar hatzoreretchem v'hareyotem b'chatzotzrot." Next week, we're going to talk about those trumpets that were blown when things were difficult. V'chitavo milchama ba'artzachem. When war comes to your country, to your place, v'hareyotem b'chatzotzrot, the first thing that we do is we cry out in tefillah. I ask you to please join me from your homes as Rabbi Stephen Exler, the Rav of the Bayit, the Hebrew Institute of Riverdale, leads us in a parak of Tehillim.
I'm going to lead Tehillim Kuf Chaf Aleph, Psalm 121. While unmuted, please respond after me, pasuk by pasuk from home, as we lift our voices together. Shir lamalot, esa einai el ha'arim, me'ayin yavo ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai, osei shamayim va'aretz. Al yitein lamot raglecha, al yanum shomerecha. Hinei lo yanum velo yishan, shomer Yisrael. Adonai shomerecha, Adonai tzilecha al yad yaminecha. Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka, v'yareach balayla. Adonai yishmocha mikol ra, yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmor tzitecha uvoecha, me'ata v'ad olam.
Thank you, Rav Stephen. Thank you very much. B'chitavo milchama ba'artzachem v'hareyotem b'chatzotzrot. It's not only that we cry out in tefillah, but I think that I represent myself and so many of us when we feel like we want to do something, but we don't exactly know how to do it. and we feel like we want to say something, but it's so hard for us to find the right words. The words of comfort, the words of defense, the words of solidarity, the words of kindness, the words of compassion. How do you find the words that matter? How do you say something from so far away that will make a difference? How do you advocate? How do you speak? How do you speak to our children? How do we speak to our colleagues? How do we speak to the people in our community? How do we write? And sometimes we actually struggle to find those words. But I guess the Torah is telling us that even though we struggle, we should try anyway, because there's no other choice. Over the last couple of months, I have had the privilege of speaking to somebody whose life has been dedicated to Medinat Israel, most recently here. The Consul General, the acting Consul General in New York, Israel Nitzan, is somebody who lives his life and has devoted his life and continues to devote his life to Medinat Israel through the gift of his words. I've called him to ask for his wisdom, ask for his understanding, to talk about, and we've called him to talk about the things that are happening in Medinat Israel and how we could be partners, how we could be good relatives and sons and daughters and siblings of our brothers and sisters in Medinat Israel, how we could find those right words. So first of all, Mr. Consul General, I want to take this opportunity to thank you for those words. Again, personally to me over the last couple of months, they've been uplifting and meaningful, and I hope that relationship with our community will continue. I want to thank you for always, really always, early in the morning, late at night, taking those calls, responding to those texts, and being present for us while you are representing Medinat Israel, and for your agreeing to speak tonight to give us a little bit about your perspective, the government's perspective on the situation, what we need to know, what we need to do, and how we can do it right. Thank you very, very much.
Okay, so now I'm unmuted. First of all, thank you so much, Rabbi Krause, for this very kind introduction. And it is mutual, and you know that when if you call, the answer is of course yes. And there was no doubt that that of course I'm happy to join, of course, you and the community, and especially in light of what's going on in Israel. And I want to thank you and all our friends from SAR and the co-sponsor organizations and the community, the wonderful community in Riverdale, for organizing this gathering. I want also to thank you for your work in educating the next generation of members of the Jewish community with strong Jewish identity, and Israel as a meaningful part of the Jewish identity. And we just met one of your graduates, Joe Block, and with the purple beret of Givati, you should be very proud of your education. You asked me to share some thoughts about the situation in Israel and an update, so I will update you. I will also share some thoughts, and maybe we can have a conversation with questions and answers. I'm not going to cover all aspects of the situation in Israel. If you want, we can basically have a conversation after that. So the situation is as follows. I'm sure that you're all following. Hamas and the Islamic Jihad have fired more than 4,000 rockets from Gaza in the past 10 days. These rockets were aimed in order to target our communities, our civilian communities, and they were shot indiscriminately. We have 12 people killed in Israel, including Indian and Thai nationals. More than 1 million Israelis are now currently under the threat of rocket fire. Basically, life has come to a halt in half of the country. Hamas, a terrorist organization that has been in control over the Gaza Strip for 14 years now, is committing double war crime by shooting at our communities, but also hiding behind Palestinian civilian population and turning them into human shields. One interesting thing to say is that out of more than 4,000 rockets, I think that all in all, what our statistics show that about 1 of each 7 rockets fell short in the Gaza Strip, basically exploding within the territory of the Gaza Strip. We have indications, we actually know that it's not only putting Palestinian lives in danger. We also know that there were Palestinian casualties during these failed shootings. The IDF has launched since last Monday. The IDF has launched the Operation Guardians of the Walls, following the shooting of rockets towards Jerusalem on last Monday. We're talking about, the IDF has carried out about over 2,000 attacks, attacking Hamas military targets in recent days. We're talking about precise and targeted actions at terrorists only and not at civilians. The goal of our operation is to degrade the Hamas military capabilities, to target its arms depots, its rocket manufacturing facilities, its tunnels inside Gaza and tunnels leading into Israel, and basically again to weaken Hamas's military capabilities. For example, the IDF has struck at Hamas's military underground activity, including the metro, which is a network of underground military tunnels. This is basically a terror city underneath the Gaza Strip. Hamas has basically invested an entire decade and billions of dollars worth of cement in the excavation of these tunnels. We're talking about more than 100 kilometers of tunnels underneath the Gaza Strip. Most of it, if not all of it, let's say a considerable part of it is gone by now following the attacks of the IDF. Maybe we should say that instead of using, again, billions of dollars of worth of cement that could have gone to building hospitals, building schools, building clinics, it went underneath the ground and now it's basically gone. Israel is, again, fighting a terrorist organization that targets Israeli civilians and, again, hides behind Palestinian human shields. And we're doing everything in our power to avoid civilian casualties, and we regret every non-combatant lost in Gaza. I would also like maybe to say a few words about Iron Dome. With an exceptional interception rate of more than 90%, it basically saves Israeli lives. But not only that, it allows Israel to minimizing the civilian casualties on the Israeli side. It allows us to delay the potential escalation or to a wider military campaign. And again, it's to go into an unnecessary additional wider escalation with Hamas. And of course, I need to say, as we always say, that we thank the US Congress and the US administration for their partnership and their support in this important project. I think that you also, the amazing images images from Star Wars in the Israeli skies these days, it saved a lot of Israeli lives. In addition to targeting Hamas's military sites, we are also these days, especially since the Chag, we're trying to address the humanitarian needs of the population in Gaza. So yesterday there were 3 attempts actually to facilitate the entrance of a convoy of 40 trucks carrying food, medical equipment, and other humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip. There were 3 attempts yesterday and several attempts today. It was hindered by Hamas when Hamas chose to fire mortars at the crossing, the Kerem Shalom crossing, basically preventing these trucks from entering and bringing aid to civilians within the Gaza Strip. These shooting mortars eventually also led to the killing of 2 Thai workers right next to Kerem Shalom border crossing, and injuring of additional 10 persons. We are also engaged in diplomacy these days, especially with the US administration. We have an ongoing dialogue both in Israel. Hadi Amir is from the State Department, is on the ground, involved in direct in discussions with the Israeli government. We also have direct calls, 4 calls between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu. There were calls between the Minister of Defense, Gantz, and Secretary of Defense, as well as, of course, Secretary Blinken is also involved in these diplomatic efforts to end this conflict. While we hope that a ceasefire will soon be reached, Hamas cannot use this ceasefire as an opportunity to rearm, to regroup, and only to attack again in a week or a month or a year. We believe that Hamas must understand that they will not be able to fire at Israel without them being held responsible and face the consequences. Basically, this is part of our vision for the day after. I think that we reached the point in our conflict that we are discussing the day after, and this is our main effort to make sure that Hamas has no, let's say, basically has lost its military capabilities and also the motivation to target and to attack Israel. If you want, we can talk later about my experience also in 2014 when I worked at the UN, also about the discussion about the day after with the Security Council resolution back then. But we can talk about it later if you want. Again, Hamas must understand that they will not be able to fire at Israel without being responsible and face the consequences. We believe that a legitimate ceasefire will only happen when Hamas's military capabilities are degraded and their will to fight is basically exhausted. And we believe that with the right ceasefire and an extended period of peace and quiet that comes with it, both sides will be able to rebuild and aid. So it doesn't mean only that there will be a ceasefire, but actually an effort to rebuild and aid the population in Gaza. And that I have to say that which Hamas has prevented from reaching its citizens, and that will finally be able also to make it its way into the hands of those who actually need it. These days we call on the international community, in our diplomacy, we call on the international community to explicitly condemn Hamas for shooting rockets at our communities and to support our right, and I have to say also our obligation to protect our civilians, our citizens, and to designate Hamas as a terrorist organization, just like the United States has done. I would like to also add one more thing that we should consider in the day after, which is the problem of incitement. That this conflict, this round of violence was initiated by Hamas, basically inciting and heightening the tension on the ground in Jerusalem. This was their goal. They were trying to gain some significant political achievements in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria, as well as in Jerusalem. And the goal is, first of all, to prevent them from achieving such a significant achievement. But also, I think that the time has come to talk seriously about the problem of incitement to violence and what it could lead to, just like we saw these days. I would also like to add, to talk about another issue, which is moral clarity. Because this is basically an asymmetric war between a sovereign state and a terror organization. They target civilians intentionally. We target military infrastructure, weapons depots, and the tunnels. We do whatever we can in order to avoid harming the civilian life in Gaza. We protect civilians, even Palestinians. But I would also like to add to that, also following things that we hear here in New York and in the United States, both in the media, in rallies, and also by certain leaders, that I don't think that we can, simply one cannot apply the same framework of American social justice or racial injustice to the Israeli-Palestinian conflicts. And by some groups, there is a fundamental and sometimes even deliberate misportrayal of Israel's origins, that Israel is a product of European colonialism, for example. This false narrative completely erases the Jewish people's indigenous history and relationship to the land of Israel. And it's very easy for some people, bystanders, I call them, on social media, for example, to make moral statements denying Israel's legitimacy. I wish to make clear that the importance of context and knowing history, while these statements about morality, equality, and justice sound nice, they are empty moral platitudes and devoid of context and history. They simplify a very complicated, complex, decades-old conflict in my country while serving no justice to either side. And we see, these days, we see celebrities making dangerous statements such as, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, willfully ignoring what such a chant implies, the eradication of the state of Israel. And I think that I would expect leaders here in New York to denounce it. It is possible to criticize Israel in a thoughtful manner that appreciates the complexity of the situation without denying its legitimacy. Again, I would expect someone who claims to care so deeply about the conflict to at least visit Israel and to engage in a dialogue and to understand the nuanced details. Unfortunately, many of these very people who have never made any trip to Israel continue to speak up and to attack Israel in a very unfair and biased way. We should also ask, for such, social justice activists, where is your criticism of Hamas? Not only are we missing criticism of Hamas's 4,000 rockets indiscriminately aimed at Israeli civilians, we're also missing criticism of Hamas's human rights record and their abuse of their own people. There is no moral equivalent between Israel and Hamas, and to even compare the two is a false dichotomy. So again, I believe that the use of American social justice framework to allow for only a shallow interpretation of this conflict, it denies Israel's legitimacy, it denies the culpability of Hamas, and it only serves to sow more violence and distance us from peace. I want to add one more thing, especially following what happened today in the Upper East Side. We're outraged by the images we've seen last night in LA and in the Upper East Side tonight. It's totally unacceptable and it must stop. And we will speak up and we will continue to stand by the Jewish community here. And we thank community leaders and also law enforcement for their action against expressions of anti-Semitism and attacks against the Jewish community. I want to thank again your community for the messages of support during these difficult days in Israel. Again, you may criticize Israeli policies. Many of the leaders in this community know that we can engage in a frank conversation. We may disagree on many things, but at least we can have a frank conversation. because this is the nature of our relationship, that is genuine and it's honest. But I know that we can always count on your solidarity with our sisters and brothers in Israel. It is very important for us at the Consulate, and it is heartwarming. And I wanted to again to thank you for hosting this event and for inviting me. And I'm happy to answer questions and to engage in a dialogue.
Thank you again, Consul General Nitzan. There are a bunch of questions coming in. One question was about the Palestinian elections. We know that those have been delayed. Anything that we can know about in terms of what might be happening with that, how that will affect maybe not the immediate situation, but the medium term?
Well, first of all, I should say that one of the Hamas's attempt right now, the reason for them to engage and actually to engage in this very provocative activity in Jerusalem and the West Bank, and turning Jerusalem into their main, let's say, goal of to portray themselves as the guardians of Jerusalem, is due to the fact that they want to. Hamas is trying to take over the Palestinian Authority. Hamas is trying to, following the 2007 coup d'etat in the Gaza Strip, when they kicked the Fatah and the Palestinian Authority out of the Gaza Strip. They try to do the same today in the West Bank. They look at Mahmoud Abbas, and they believe that they can actually have a better, let's say, a better position using incitement and incitement to violence, and again turning Jerusalem into their main issue, their main political, let's say, flag that they carry. So this is a source of concern. That's the reason, by the way, that we would like to end this conflict when Hamas is much weaker and cannot threaten. First of all, cannot threaten the pragmatic, let's say, voices within the Palestinian camp. Regarding the elections, we will have to see. It's a decision of the Palestinian Authority and Mahmoud Abbas to take. And not, of course, we can engage with them, and the American administration is also engaged with the Palestinian Authority. But the goal here is basically to prevent. Our goal is to prevent Hamas from taking over also the West Bank and the Palestinian Authority.
There's a question about the sentiment of the Gaza population. Is there a silent majority which is anti-Hamas and captive to it, or is your sense that population is generally supportive? I'm getting a sense of the culpability of the civilians, so to speak, is the question.
Well, I don't think that there is any public opinion poll done in the Gaza Strip recently, but as far as I know, as far as I understand, they're very critical of Hamas. Basically, they live under this a dictatorship of Hamas in the Gaza Strip that again exploits and take advantage of all the resources for their military buildup instead of investing in the communities themselves. I don't think that they have other choice. They cannot rebel, they cannot confront Hamas these days. But if you're asking me, as far as I understand, yes, they are against Hamas and against the rule of Hamas. And again, I should say that the Palestinians themselves are not our enemy. The goal right now here is to degrade, to weaken Hamas. And to have a better, let's say, political and diplomatic position for the day after.
Can you address, please, some of the unrest, the protests within of the Israeli Arabs then in Lod and Akko, and considered next steps and how to restore calm and to bring people back together?
Yeah, I think that this is one of the most unfortunate and difficult outcomes of this operation in Gaza. we condemn the radicals and the extremists and those who engage in violence on both sides, both the Jews and the Arabs. And the Prime Minister, both the Prime Minister and the President actually spoke about it several times. There is a need to address this problem, and so the Israeli police and the border police is deployed in those communities where we saw this violence. I think that we are very much concerned about the situation. Israel is a democracy. Israel is a liberal and very diverse society. So you have voices from different sectors, from within different communities, and it is very natural. And of course, we will need to address, and we make an effort to address the problem of those actionist voices from both communities. But I have to say that at the end of the day, we're talking about, and I'm not underestimating the importance of what happened and the severity of what happened, and the need to address the different aspects of this problem. But I also want to say that we're talking about very vocal and violent minority, when I think that both the Jewish and the Arab community in Israel want to live in peace together. I think that they share this vision of a shared future, Jewish and Arab in Israel. And in many ways, there have been efforts both by the government in the last 5-6 years to address genuine attempts to actually to allocate a significant amount of money, billions of shekels that were allocated to minimize the gap between the Arab communities and the Jewish community, between Arabs and Jews in Israel, both in recovering infrastructure in the Arab villages. Secondly, also in order to encourage Arab students to go to university, to academic studies, and basically to empower the young leadership within the Arab community. Another issue that is very important, and the government actually was trying to address during the COVID-19 crisis, for example, is the issue of access to broadband internet. When the government found out that people were laid out and children could not go to school, and the government realized that in, let's say, in the more remote areas in which you have mainly Arab communities, they do not have access to broadband, so they cannot go study remotely, and they cannot actually take some, the Ministry of Labor had amazing projects of online courses on their websites, but certain communities could not actually take those courses because they had no access to the internet. So the government actually encouraged and paid to the cellular companies in Israel to deploy their antennas actually in the more remote areas, and actually to allow certain communities to enjoy the access to broadband. This is the government level. The civil society in Israel, for example, people in Tel Aviv, there were campaigns in order to collect, for example, laptops and tablets and that were not used in Tel Aviv, and to send it to those Arab communities in the more remote areas, and actually make the connection also between the children. So there is an effort, and I think that both communities believe in our shared future together. I'm not saying that things are easy, but I truly believe that what we're seeing is a violent and vocal minority that we will need to take care of. We will need to address this problem. But I truly believe that the vast majority of the population do not share these views.
There was a question about I guess it's a Hasbara question around the Al Jalad tower in Gaza, and I guess the confusion around how much information was out there explaining why that happened, etc. How would you respond to that?
We know that that Hamas had their military intelligence offices and headquarters in and underneath that building. That building was attacked following again, an effort by the IDF to make sure that all the people in the building actually had left it, and it was empty during the strike. The presence of military facilities over there in the building makes it a legitimate legal military target. I have to say that, one should ask if you have journalists actually with offices in a building in which you have also offices by the military intelligence of their group, how is it that they did not report about it or did not know about it? We shared the information and we shared the intelligence with the American administration, and Secretary Blinken issued a statement, I think it was yesterday or today, that they have received the information from Israel, and the intelligence from Israel showing that yes, Hamas was actually had offices inside this building.
Couple of questions about Yom Yerushalayim, Al-Aqsa. Why did the police go in? What happened with those speakers? President Rivlin speaking, the front page of the New York Times days ago. Like, what happened that night?
Again, it's the point here is that, again, we are, this is the outcome. It was a planned Hamas was basically again looking at this date this was a very Hamas was planning to use the religious and national sentiments during the Ramadan month, and where they realized that everything was supposed, their incitement and building up the tension was aimed at actually at this date of the first day of the attack on Jerusalem, the rocket attack on Jerusalem, last Monday, May 10th. That was basically Yom Yerushalayim, the day in which we celebrate the reunification of the city. It was the day after Laylatul Qadr, which is the holiest night of Ramadan, and also the issue of the discussion, the hearing in the Supreme Court on the question of the eviction of people who claim that they are the residents of Sheikh Jarrah. So Hamas was basically building up this tension, leading to a violent confrontation on the Temple Mount, basically encouraging, and this is what happened. The Palestinian rioters gathered over there with rocks, with rods, and aimed at attacking basically the Jewish Israelis who were supposed to go on the Temple Mount for Yom Yerushalayim. Eventually, the government and the police decided not to allow them to go on Jews to go on the Temple Mount on that day. In parallel, the Attorney General of the State of Israel reached out to the Supreme Court and asked the Supreme Court to postpone and to delay the hearing on the question of Sheikh Jarrah. The idea was to try to de-escalate the situation. So there were two measures taken by the government of Israel. One, to go to the Supreme Court and encourage them to postpone any discussion and also the implementation of the eviction to later in June. And secondly, to prevent Jews from going on the Temple Mount. There was another measure taken, which is in order to reduce the friction between Jews and Arabs on that day. The idea was to change the route of the Flag March, which is an annual march celebrating the reunification of Jerusalem, and to basically avoid the friction with the Arab community. Eventually, it was canceled because of the rocket attack against Jerusalem. So Hamas was building up the tension. The people, the rioters on the Temple Mount, eventually attacked the Israeli police, who is there in order to maintain law and order. They attacked the police. They started throwing rocks at the people who were praying, Jews who were praying at the temple at the Western Wall, leading to a much more an attempt by the Israeli police to disperse this riot and the violence and the rioters on the Temple Mount. Hamas, again, part of the plan, Hamas gave Israel an ultimatum to withdraw the police from the Temple Mount and from Sheikh Jarrah. This was a pretext to launch these rockets at Jerusalem. It was 6 p.m. local time in Israel. Of course, they knew that Israel is not going to withdraw any police officer from the Temple Mount on that day, and eventually leading to the attack on Jerusalem and to have a very wide-scale attack against our communities on that day. So this is what happened on that Monday. That was basically a planned development of events by Hamas in order to again, their goal is to carry this flag of the guardians, to portray themselves as the guardians of Jerusalem, and to weaken Mahmoud Abbas and to basically gain political achievements. They are basically, they are in the Gaza Strip. The leadership of Hamas is in the Gaza Strip as well as in Qatar, and they know that this was their attempt in order to gain some political achievements both in the West Bank and in Jerusalem, and we were not ready to give them any achievement, any political achievement, not even a symbolic one.
Thank you. I know there are a lot of questions. I'm sorry that we weren't able to get to all of them. I do want to respond to one, sorry, on your dime, that was asked of me. If I regret inviting our local congressman to speak to our students, I do not. I think it's important to engage our local officials. I also think it's important to call them out publicly when we disagree with the language that they're using and the facts that they're conveying or not conveying, and that's what we've tried to do. We're also an educational institution, so we try to decide on programs and also statements that are appropriate for the institution, and we try to make those judgments correctly and those decisions with good grace, and that's the best that we can do, and we will continue to try to do. Consul General Nitzan, thank you again. Really, really appreciate it. You're being with us, and you're using your kochot to represent Medinat Israel here. And like I said, hopefully this will be one of many conversations with our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I also just would like to echo the thanks to the Consul General. Thank you so much for spending so much time with our community when so much is going on, and we treasure the relationship and the opportunity to dialogue directly with you. And to the SAR community, we were very hopeful, and until about an hour ago, the Honorable Robert Wexler, who's president of the S. Daniel Abraham Center for Middle East Peace and former congressman of Florida, he's unable to make it. I think his dedication and commitment to the diplomatic work that he does called him away, and he is unable to participate with us this evening. The relationship that our SAR community we have with Robert Wexler is one that we cherish. He expresses his deep apology for not being able to join us this evening, and hopefully we will have an opportunity in the future to be able to dialogue with him. We will close out our program this evening with tefillah. I would like to call upon first Rabbi Sarah Horowitz of the Bayit of the Hebrew Institute of Riverdale to recite the Tefillah L'Shlom HaMedina, followed by Rabbi Shmuel Hain of the Young Israel Tzedek of North Riverdale to recite the Mishabech Chayalei Tzahal. After that will be a video presentation for a few short moments. Rabbi Sarah.
Thank you. What a really tough but important night. Thank you to all the sponsors and to SAR for bringing us together. It's tefillah that we say every Shabbat. And although we're so grateful for our soldiers and for all those protecting us, the line that I just am focused on, Hagen Aleha, shield Israel under the wings of your loving kindness, God. Spread over it the tabernacle of your peace. May we know shalom. Please join along with me while muted. Avinu Shebashamayim, Sur Yisrael v'Goalo, Barech et Medinat Yisrael v'Shit Tzmichat Golatinu, Hagen Aleha, Bavrach Chesdecha, Ofras Aleha Sukat Shlomecha, Osach Orcha, Bamidcha, L'Rasheha, Sareha, V'Yotzeha, V'Taknein Be'etzat Tova L'Fanecha. Chazek et Yedei Miginei Eretz Kachenu, V'Anchileim Elohenu, Yeshua V'Teret Nitzachon, Tatreim V'Natata Shalom Ba'eretz V'Simchat Olam B'Yoshveha. Bet Achenu, Kol Beit Yisrael, V'Kadna B'Chol Artzot, V'Zarenu, V'Tolichenu, Mehira Kamiyot L'Tzion Erecha, V'Lishalayim Mishkan Shmecha, Kakatu B'Tarat Moshe Avdecha, Im Yiyeh Nedachacha B'Ktzei Hashamayim, Misham Yekabtecha, Adonai Elohecha, U'Misham Yekakecha, V'Aviyecha Adonai Elohecha, Al Haaretz Asher Yarshu Abatecha, V'Yishta, V'Hetivcha, V'Yirbecha Me'Abatecha, Umal Adonai Elohecha, et levavecha, ve'et lavev zarecha, lava et Adonai Elohecha, b'chol levavecha, b'chol nafshecha, leman chayecha, ve'ached lavenu, lahava liyira et shmecha, lishmor et kol divrei Toratecha, ushlach lanu mehira ben David Mashiach tzidkecha, livdot mechakeket Yeshuatecha, v'ofa b'hadar ga'on v'zecha, al kol yoshvei tevel, artzecha v'yomar kol asher neshama ba'apo, Adonai Elohei Yisrael melech l'malchuto b'chol mashallah, amen. Selah.
Rabbi Haim.
Thank you, Rabbi Hartstark and Rabbi Krause, and thank you everyone for your participation. Thank you as well to the Acting Consul General. We have in mind our students, our brothers and sisters, our nieces and nephews, our children, and all of the Chayalei Tzahal as we recite the Mishaberach. Mishaberach Avotenu Avraham Yitzhak Yaakov, Hu Yivarech et Chayalei Tzva Hagana Yisrael, V'anshei Kochot HaBitachon, Ha'omdim al Mishmar Artzenu V'arei Eloheinu, Migvul Alvanon V'ad Midbar Mitzrayim, U'min Hayam HaGadol Al Davar V'Av, V'chol Makom Shehem B'Yabasha Ba'Avir V'Yam. Yiten Hanai et Oivenu Hakamim Aleinu Nigafim L'Fneihem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yishmor V'Yatzil et Chayleinu, Mikol Tzara V'Tzukah, Mikol Nego Machala, Yishlach Bracha V'Atzlacha B'chol Ma'aseh Yedehem. Yad Ber Sanenu Tachtehem Yatre Meketer Yeshua V'Ateret Nitzachon, V'Kuyam B'Hem HaKatuv, Ki Adonai Elohechem, Ha'holech Imachem, Lilachem Lachem, Im Oivechem L'Hoshia Etchem, V'Nomar Amen.
Avotenu הקדושים, הקדושים, הוא יברך את חיילי ישראל, את חיילי ישראל, מי שבירך אבותינו הקדושים, הקדושים, הוא יברך את חיילי ישראל, את חיילי ישראל. השם ישמור, ישמור ויציל אתכם. השם ישמור, ישמור ויציל אתכם, את חיילינו. הקדושים. מי שבעירה אבותינו הקדושים, הוא יברך חיילי ישראל, את חיילי ישראל.